Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, or good whatever, wherever you happen to be in the world. It is really exciting to be here at VetSecCon today, the second year in a row I get to speak, which is awesome. My name is Brad Rhodes, and I'll tell you a little bit about my background here in a second. But if you are looking for left of boom, 3 basic skills to practice before a cyber incident, you're in the right place. Yes, I have slides. And I'm going to show you those slides here in just a second, but I also have a whole bunch of demo stuff as well. So we're going to jump in. So go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here so we get that part out of the way, because I don't want to start talking and not have slides. So there you go. There's title slide. It's October still. Happy early Halloween to everybody out there. Roles that I play in life, in real life. I am in industry. I am a military member, current, and a veteran of multiple deployments, and also academia. I teach on the side when I have an opportunity to. So let's go ahead and get rolling. So here's our big, scary, hairy agenda. We're going to start off with where to begin. We're going to talk about what do you see if you remember the tagline for my presentation, which hopefully got you interested to sign up and come hang out with me for a little bit. It alluded to The Sixth Sense, which is a great M. Night Shyamalan movie, but it's very apropos to what we're going to talk about today. 3 basic skills, no surprise there: logs, networks, assets. We're going to talk about each one of those in turn. We're going to talk and give you some examples of how you can get after that stuff right now, things you can use today. Really appreciated the previous talk to mine, Stephen. He did an amazing job, especially for folks looking at the CISO gig. But I know that many of my fellow compatriots and veterans out there, or transitioning military members, are looking for the, what do I need to know, as I'm trying to figure out, is this cybersecurity thing for me? Where do I go? Where do I start? And that's what this presentation is all about. At the end, we'll do some conclusions. And my goal with this, and y'all can hold me to this, is to do this in about 40 minutes, because this is a 50-minute block. And then I'm going to be happy to take questions at the end, because I know they always there's always good questions when it comes to this kind of stuff. All right, so let's dig in. So who am I? I am Brad Rhodes. In my day job, I am the head of cybersecurity at an awesome company in Greenwood Village, Colorado, called Zavilo. We do web content categorization and cyber threat intelligence. Obviously, as a cyber guy, I love the cyber threat intelligence piece of that. Additionally, mentioned I was a military member. I'm a colonel. I'm a cyber warfare officer, and I am currently the CIO G6 for the 76th Operational Response Command in the U.S. Army Reserve. A little tidbit: if I have to stretch or do something, what looks to be like an awkward position, I just finished some surgery for a couple of torn hamstrings that happened to me during an ACFT event. So God bless America, keep on charging. I'm an MCPA, Military Cyber Professionals Association. I teach, I write, I coach cyber patriot teams, which is lots of fun. Way too many professional certifications. And I will highlight this to you, and you're going to get this at the end as well, is I have lots of presentations of late and articles and things like that I've done. If you need a reference or a point of reference or something, I mentioned a tool in this discussion that you want to go back to. This presentation and many others that I have done are on my GitHub site and free for the grabbing. Please go there and take those out and use them as you need. Sorry, they're not PowerPoint, they're PDF, but there you go. We'll stop that. We'll answer that question up front. Okay, so where do we start? I think everybody would agree the last 18 months have been just a little nuts. Who would have thunk that 18 plus months ago we would have been in the midst of a continuing and ongoing global pandemic? We will have all been through lockdowns, restrictions, moved. Some of you may have never worked from home before, moved to work from home. Even some of the current military folks out there, that's been a thing. Really, really interesting times. Watched organizations that weren't even prepared for that. They thought the pandemic thing was going to be 2 weeks and we were good. And then they had to retool their enterprises completely for remote work, VPNs, the whole 9 yards. Pretty scary stuff. In my day job at Zavilo, we chased those emboldened malicious cyber actors. We saw scams on medicine and fake treatments for COVID-19 and money-making schemes. In fact, we ran across one. It was a major news outlet that was actually serving the malicious map, the malicious COVID-19 map that had been co-opted and then pwned by bad guys over in overseas somewhere. You can probably guess where that is. And those bad guys were basically dropping Monero stealers and other backdoors onto systems using that map. And this news organization had no idea that they were serving that. So that was out there. We've seen misinformation on just about everything. And just a quick pause there. I do information operations stuff for the military as well. Good night, please. Take some time to educate yourself on misinformation, educate your friends, your families, everything like that. I will tell you, based on what I've seen and observed and what I saw not only during the election, but throughout the pandemic, is there is a large overseas threat actor component to all of the misinformation. Yes, we do a lot of that to ourselves, but there's a whole chunk of it that's coming from overseas and is absolutely amplified by overseas threat actors, and it's really darn scary. U.S. presidential election happened. Doesn't matter, whether you were happy or not about that, it happened. Right. And then we had the awful attack on the U.S. Capitol, which the first time the Capitol had been breached since the War of 1812. Again, lots of misinformation around everything related to that. Then it's been crazy. And then, of course, for many of us, near and dear to many of our hearts here as veterans and military members, was the withdrawal from Afghanistan. And some might argue that we did that very terribly. And I don't necessarily disagree with that, but there's lots of things that happen at the strategic level that, maybe we don't have privy to. But the biggest thing that I want to touch on before I move on is I want to ask you this question. Are you okay? And this is really important here. Veteran suicides, next month is Suicide Prevention Month. Veteran suicides are, 21, 22 veterans a day are taking their lives. That's not cool. It's not groovy. And maybe it's because nobody ever asked you if you were okay. And I really, truly want to tell you, I want to know if you're okay, because if you're not okay, there's resources out there. Heck, I'm going to tell you right now, here is my LinkedIn. Hit me up. I'm happy to chat with whoever. I want to make sure that you're okay. So let's jump into this cyber thing. So what do you see? So remember my M. Night Shyamalan reference. The Bruce Willis's character at one point, says to the little boy, he says, well, what do you see? And the little boy kind of tears up and says, I see dead people. They're all around me. Well, when in cybersecurity, I see attacks. They're all around us. They're happening every day. And the things that we're going to go through this afternoon and this morning are things that can help you right now to be a little bit more cognizant of what's happening and making sure you know what you're seeing. We see things like misconfigurations and the standard phishing campaigns and spear phishing campaigns, insider threats, right? That's a huge thing right there. We've put so much stuff into the cloud. It's hard to say who the heck has access to what anymore. And there's many organizations that don't really have a clue. There's the hacker. I know Chris Roberts and Malware Jake and others would, give me a hard time for putting the guy in the hoodie and thing, but it gets the point across, right? There are people out there that are always working to get after us and do bad things to us. And so we have to be cognizant of that. A ransomware attacks, right? That is the soup du jour, the delivery mechanism of badness of today. 2020 was a banner year for ransomware. 2021 right now is on track to be way worse. Not sure what the total numbers are going to be yet, but it's crazy. And then, of course, we know the big bad advanced persistent threats are out there. And I will tell you, it's interesting when you get a chance to interact with an APT, but also scary at the same time. I see APT activity on my home network on a regular basis because they always have bots out there that are scanning, looking for endpoints into your systems, even your home network. So something to think about there. All right, so let's keep going. 3 basic skills: logs and log analysis. We're going to talk through that. Networks and traffic analysis. And then the one that is kind of that I've been sort of talking about off and on for the last couple of years now is asset management. We have a really weird understanding of asset management in the business, whether it's IT, cybersecurity, whatever, and it's bizarre. And we think that assets are only one thing, but really assets are a whole lot more than what we think they are. And so it's really important to understand that. All right, logs, not tree logs that you chop down in your yard, but logs, right? Where do we find logs? We find logs in everything. So obviously there's Windows logging. The quick secret on Windows logging: if you get a Windows Home Edition box, and I'll show you a thing here in a second, you don't want Windows Home Edition a machine, great. However, none of the really nice granular logging comes turned on. You actually have to go do that yourself. And so that's point number one. You got to know how to turn on logs. You got to know where they are located. Obviously in Windows, it's the event viewer. In Linux, the Linux and Mac as well, and you see my Linux icon and my Mac icon, the penguin and the apple, those logs are text-based. And the good news is with Linux, the vast majority of those logs are very rich out of the box. and they're turned on and they are ready to go. We have another picture on this slide of a network, right? So everything in the network produces logs. Your printer produces logs. And we'll talk more about printers here in a little bit because printers are fun. But there's definitely a lot of things to think about in your own network, right? Your Wi-Fi router, your ISP modem or ISP device, it produces logs. You should be looking at those. The Internet of Things, everything in the Internet of Things, your car that connects to the Wi-Fi when you pull into the garage because it doesn't get updates on its system, if you do or not, if you don't do that, it produces logs. Right. And so you have to get after all of those logs. And oh, by the way, sometimes that's easy, sometimes it's not, but you need to know where to find logs. Next is tuning logs or expanding them. So on the left-hand side here, this is a great link that you can get from the presentation later, malwarearchaeology.com/cheat sheets. That's a screenshot of a couple of their amazing one of their amazing cheat sheets on how to set up good Windows logging. The good news is it tells you how to do it basically for all signs of Windows, but for Windows 10 Home, which doesn't have any of the pretty GUIs. So you can do all of that at the terminal, really useful stuff. And probably the big thing when we're thinking about turning on stuff in Windows logging, I'm going to show you why that's important here in a second, is you need to turn on command line logging. How many people have seen the demonstration that's like, oh my gosh, there's a threat actor on the box. Do you see him? And you don't see him. And you're like, but somebody's telling you there's totally a threat actor on that box. And then you go look in something in sysinternal suite, like Process Explorer or Process Monitor or any other way to get after that, right? And all of a sudden you see that there's all of these processes, say, command prompt processes running without a window on the screen. That's pretty concerning, right? Well, guess what? If you had turned on command line logging and were alerting on that, you would have caught those things. Linux, like I said, is really pretty great out of the box, with the exception of one thing. A lot of times in most Linux distributions, and I'm going to sort of just point on the arrow here, is they only provide you information logging. But if you want to get all of the priorities and severities that you see on the screen there, you need to actually flip that and turn on debug for everything beyond just, authorizations and the mail stuff. Right, super important to do that to get more and more goodness out of your Linux logs. Excuse me. So we're going to do a demo. Like I said, I promised we weren't going to stick in PowerPoint the whole time because that's super boring, and I would agree with you that I would leave my presentation if I was just doing slides. So first off, I'm going to be apologetic and kind of not apologetic up front. I'm a bit of a Microsoft Power BI fanboy. It is and was at one time a really poorly written tool, in Brad's opinion, that sat on top of MS SQL databases. Wasn't very good. Microsoft has actually semi-open sourced that, and they've turned it into something absolutely amazing. I love using Power BI for security purposes. And so we're going to look at that. But the first thing we're going to talk about is the Windows Event Viewer. So one of the things that we want to do is we want to get data out of the Windows Event Viewer. And if you've ever looked at the window, here it is, the Windows Event Viewer, right? This thing is a terrible interface. It's got a lot of great data in it, but it's not great in terms of search. It's not great in terms of isolating what's going on. And oh, by the way, if you're trying to pick through a bunch of events here in Windows logging, right, it can be terribly slow. Especially if you don't know what you're looking for. But I want to show you with Power BI is a way to look for stuff that maybe you don't have to be a rocket scientist or a genius to know how to find stuff in these Windows logs. But the first thing you need to know when it comes to getting data out of here is to get the Windows logs out of Event Viewer into something that is useful. So in this case here, we're really concerned about all the Windows logs, but in this case here, we're going to look specifically at security. And to get that data, you're going to say save all events as, and I'm going to go to my desktop. I'm going to put in my handy dandy VetSecCon folder. And in this case here, it's really simple. We turn that down. We save it as a CSV. And I'm just going to call it test.csv, just for fun. Now, this is going to grab all of those Windows events for the security log, which is good, very useful. So I'm going to give you some fair warning here. If you try to open that up in a spreadsheet, it may or may not open because sometimes it corrupts on the format. But let's get over to Power BI. So let me get to Power BI. So Power BI is an incredibly powerful tool, as I mentioned. What I want to do here, though, is I want to show you in the Get Data section, this tool, right, from a security perspective, from an IT perspective, right, can ingest almost 100 different data points, data types now. It can ingest everything from Excel spreadsheets to CSVs, XMLs. It can detonate XMLs natively. So if you don't want to, if you're just learning this, right, and I wholly recommend you figure out how to parse things in code, whether it's XML or JSON. But I really want you to, if you want to get started and you want to figure out how to what you can get out of an XML file, do it in Power BI. Right, it's a great way to sort of learn the structure of those kinds of documents. It can ingest PDFs. It can ingest all sorts of databases. It can tie and get connected back to Azure SQL, all the Azure stuff. It can connect back to Amazon Redshift. So many things you can connect this thing to. It's amazing, but we don't care about that. We're going to just look real quickly at what happens if you ingest a CSV. In this case, the log, the security logs that we just exported from Event Viewer. So I'm going to say connect there. Really simple. I'm just going to say test.csv. I'm going to open that, and we're going to see if it's going to do. And okay, so I'm not going to go further here. I'm going to show you what this is, right? So if the CSV or the Excel spreadsheet or whatever you ingest has titles for the columns, it'll give you those as your top level categories, right? And then it will auto do a lot of work here and do a lot of things. You can actually transform data. You can parse data on the ingest. Here's the power of Power BI, not to be tongue-in-cheek about that, but the power in Power BI is that you can actually split fields, right? And then the next time that you get another dump of that file, you just simply refresh the data, and all of the cool visualizations that you build and all the analysis you did just refreshes itself, right? So you don't have to redo a bunch of work. Again, I'm kind of a Power BI fanboy. All right, so let's look real quick at how we would parse through Windows log in a Windows log file in Microsoft Power BI. So first off, right, we have a listing here. So I've made some charts. Again, visualizations, you can make a bunch of charts with that. Again, I'm telling you this up front, so I don't have to explain it again when we get to further demos. But again, you can do line charts, you can do scatter plots, you can do pie charts like we have here, you can do baseball cards, you can do text lists. It's absolutely amazing. But the true power in Power BI is the ability to filter data very quickly. Now, this is a Windows log file from a demo attack that I did for a pen testing class that I was helping to teach. And so, not giving anything away here. The bad guys, me, did stuff with Python in here. So we're going to go look specifically for Python. Notice what I'm just going to filter on. I'm filtering on command line details. Incredibly important, because I turned that switch on in that Windows box that I attacked, right? I caught everything the bad guy did. And so remember, it's Python. So I'm just going to see if anything in my command line details contain Python. And lo and behold, there it is. That is the attacker using Python against me, my Python installation against me, and opening up a micro server. Oh, by the way, that comes with Python to serve or to get data off of the machine that they got onto, right? Probably a data exfil. Right? Very basic example, but you get the gist of how quickly you can find stuff in Power BI if you have a general clue or even not of what you're looking for. So let's look at another thing. Another thing incredibly powerful is the ability to do times. So you can see these are all of those command line events. This is 4688 command line events. And these are all the things at different points in time that have happened. So same kind of thing. I simply want to filter and find that Python so I can narrow down that exact time when whatever badness happened occurred. So let me get there to Python. I'm going to say apply filter. And here we go, right here. So I'm going to walk over that. That's Python. Don't care about that one. They tried it there, and here's the actual one that worked. The Python -m http.server1234. Sorry if that's a little small. Bottom line here, right? Very quickly, I got through this to find out where the badness is and narrow down to the exact time frame. You can do this tomorrow. Power BI is a free tool. It's really great stuff. You can do this on your home machine. You can collect Windows event logs. You can turn on command line log. You can do all of those things just to get a little bit smarter and practice skills left of boom. All right. So I'm going to say, don't save on that. All right. So let's go back. So where do we find? So the next one is networks. Where do we find networks? Well, guess what? Networks are in everything. Networks are on everything. Networks are on generally every endpoint. They could be on your crock pot now, apparently, or your toaster. And apparently, you can actually get a she who shall not be named from Amazon enabled microwave. Cool stuff, I suppose. But I would really be interested to see what the logs are in that and see if I can or cannot, turn on my microwave from afar and not burn my popcorn. But long story short, networks are everywhere. They're all around us, just like the movie. You have networks on your smartphones, and you need those networks to do the work that we do in the information age today. So you're not going to get away from networks. You can find networks and look at networks, those snapshots in times running netstat commands on either Windows or Linux. You've got the resource monitor capability, which is absolutely great in Windows, right? If you're not aware of that, look at resource monitor. There's a lot of richness you can get with, what executable is connected out via what, out of what local address, out of what port, to what remote address. Amazing stuff. You can use TCP view from the sysinternal suites. If you're not aware of that one, I definitely recommend you use that as well. Another thing that's really cool, I'm going to bring this up because it's pretty neat. And many people sometimes don't realize this, especially starting out, but I want you to have this, put this in your back pocket, right? You are not a web developer, you're a cybersecurity person, but it helps to understand how websites work. So one of the great things in all modern web browsers is you have the ability to, in this case, it's Firefox, look at developer tools. And those web developer tools, we're going to go right here. And one of the tabs here, if you look down right here, is network. Now, network kinda, right? It is going to collect all of the traffic between, whatever your browser says, right, and web servers that it's connecting to. So let's try that. Again, a little helpful micro demo in here, not one of my big formal demos that we'll get to next. All right, so I'm going to do CNN.com, right? Look at this, right? Oh my goodness. Did you have any idea that this is all of the data that your machine is contacting when it uses a web browser, right? So again, right, if you're doing research from a networking perspective, and you get from a customer or a user or something like that a URL that looks suspicious, right? One, do it behind a VPN, do it on a virtual machine, and you go there, you should watch and see what kind of behavior that website does, and all of these different things. And most people don't realize how in depth and how much data that your browser needs to actually display this pretty visualization of what is the CNN website, for example. Okay. So networks. In order to do network analysis, you got to capture network traffic. Now, you certainly can do a single box capture on your home machine. So that means that you'll be capturing all of the traffic on your machine using a tool like Wireshark. In this case, is what I did and what I use. I'm going to show here in just a second. But really, what I like to do is I like to use something like a network tap or a network span port off a switch and really grab the actual full traffic data. The reason I highlight where you put the sensor or the tap is super important is if you don't put it in the right place, you're going to miss things. You're absolutely going to miss things and walk past stuff. And so that's really important. In fact, this collection that I did here will show that, because before I moved over to fiber, which is awesome, by the way, everybody should get fiber. But before I moved over to fiber, I was using a cable a network provider, and that cable network provider, very interestingly, right, and you'll see it here in the data. Basically, the only place I could put the tap was right in front of where the network connected out to the modem. And so that meant that everything from an encapsulation perspective, think the 7-layer OSI model, looks like it's coming from the modem, but I know different, right? And so, but again, experiment with that. Definitely encourage you to do that. One of the things that's very important, and this is super, super important, a full packet capture, a full PCAP of even just a small home network like my own, for 42 minutes, just for fun, I don't know why I stopped at 42 minutes. I guess I could have gone longer, was a total of 9.3 gigs of data. So you've got to have disk space to do this. Once I reduced it so I could actually ingest it into Power BI and think that 2.1 or 2.7 gigs of data is about 2 million-ish packets. And so again, power of a tool like Power BI is you can actually ingest very, very large data files to do analysis on, and that's incredibly important in cybersecurity. Last thing on this slide is in monitoring, right? When you launch Wireshark, and I've got it pre-launched here because I didn't want to screw up and have it yell at me because I didn't run it as administrator mode. You have to run any packet capture capability, whether it's TCAP, Peak, Wireshark, T-Shark, whatever the case may be. You definitely need to make sure that you're running administrator mode so that the network interface card runs as promiscuous. That means that it's going to ingest everything coming in and out of the network card. So that's very important to know as well. But when you get the presentation later, there's a couple of cool links that'll help you with all of that. So we're gonna do some network analysis. We're gonna do a little Wiresharking, and we're gonna do a little Power BI. A couple notes here. This is the learning link for Wireshark.org. Very, very good stuff. This is an excellent course that you can jump onto that I found. Just grab the link there, and it'll take you to. It's like a 10-lesson course on YouTube. I love YouTube. So many good things on YouTube that you can find and work on training for. Now, let's look at Wireshark really quick. So Wireshark, here's Wireshark. If you've not seen Wireshark, this is a graphical packet capture tool. There's a few other ones out there, but I would argue, Brad's humble opinion, that this one is the best in the world by far. It is really great to use. So what I'm going to do here is, again, I'm just going to demonstrate a couple things for you to get you started. And please obviously go back and grab the presentation, but also go back and watch the video at some point if this doesn't make sense. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to capture my Wi-Fi access point. You might say, why do we have all these things? Well, it's because I have a bunch of private networks set up to do cool things. And I don't necessarily, want to have a bunch of isolation going on there. So let me go ahead and start capturing this. And this is just to show you a couple of tidbits in Wireshark that you need to know. So right now, I'm going to do this for about 30 seconds. Got a bunch of stuff flying by in Wireshark. Doesn't surprise anybody. We see a bunch of UDP because, again, if you didn't know, all this video stuff that we're doing right now is going over UDP because nobody really cares whether your video gets through. Even if you bought and paid for it on YouTube to be in 4K, nobody cares. So let me go ahead and hit stop. If I can get my mouse to go where it needs to go. There's my mouse. Where'd you go, mouse? There you are. Stop. Okay. So what I want to show you here really quick is a couple of things, right? So what you see is what you get on Wireshark. And that's important for two things. One, right? If you don't trust me, there's a lot more data. So if you come down here, right? Let me pull this up here. I'm just going to pick a packet. This is all the data that you see in the packet, and it's amazing. But you don't see all of that up here in the main display area. You just don't see it. It's just not there, right? You can actually add each of these fields into the display area. And I'm going to tell you why this is important. Because what you see is what you get also on the export. So if I go down here to preferences and I come down here, I'm going to bring my preferences back up here, go down to preferences, I look at columns, you notice these are the only columns displayed. I can hit plus here and I can, if I can get this to double click in there, perfect. There's a whole bunch of other stuff you can add, which is awesome. You can even do custom stuff. You can do geolocational stuff if you're enabled that feature in Wireshark. All sorts of things you can do here. However, if you don't display the column, and you go to export data, that column will not be in the exported data. So I want you to just put that in your kit bag and know that if I want to export a packet or a certain type of packets with a bunch of data associated with them, I have to actually add the appropriate columns in Wireshark so I get that data. You can't slice it if you don't have it, okay? So next, what I want to show you here really quick is a filter and then an export. So I'm going to go to, I saw some 443 in there, TCP, or I can't type today, apparently. First filter for me right there. So I'm going to go ahead and filter this thing down to simply 443 traffic. So that is typical HTTPS. It's awesome. But this is really an important point with Wireshark. If you use a filter and you go to export, and so to export, so again, we talked about the fact that Power BI can't yet, but I think it will in the future, ingest PCAPs natively. It would be awesome if it did, but it can't. But you want to export as a CSV. You're going to come here to export as a CSV. Doesn't matter what we name it, but I just want to point out two things here. One, if you were to just name your CSV and hit save right now, all you would get is the 213 443 related packets. Okay, it's good, but not so good. Because now you're missing all that other data that might be important around those packets. So you definitely want to make sure that you select whether you want to get all the captured data or all of the displayed data. And that is what I wanted to show you in Wireshark. So let's jump into Power BI and look at that network PCAP we just talked about. Okay, so this is millions and millions of data points that are in here right now. So I've got a couple of visualizations I'm going to walk you through really quick to show you again the power of this tool. One of the things I discovered when I was doing this network analysis for a big data presentation was that I saw some very odd behavior. I saw, if you notice up here, port 80, right? That doesn't make any sense to me, right? As a cybersecurity guy, I know that the vast majority of traffic on the internet today goes over HTTPS. It's encrypted. It does amazing stuff. It's great. It saves us all. We can get the little, the green the green lock bar when we buy our stuff from Amazon and feel safe and good about ourselves. It's awesome, right? Well, I got really concerned when I saw all this port 80 traffic in my network. I had no idea what it was until I did some digging. So let's find out what that is. So again, I'm going to filter here based on the destination. I know, right? And again, so destination here is important. Destination is actually IP addresses. And I set that switch in Wireshark, and in general, it's IP addresses, and if it's available, the DNS resolved name. Okay, so that's super important, right? That's something you might want to turn on. IP addresses are great, but if you know the DNS resolved name, right, in network analysis, it makes it more interesting. So I'm simply going to see, and I know this because I did this analysis previously, I'm just going to apply a filter for Xbox. And so if you notice, right, that's actually one of my kids' Xboxes that is literally out there hanging out on the internet, sending data back and forth, right? That is port 80 unencrypted. But what's interesting here is I was very concerned when I first saw this. I thought, man, I cannot believe that Microsoft would hang this kind of data out there. What exactly, right? And so these things are important, these machines, right? So right here, profile. The good news is things like my son's profile, right? His username, password, all that stuff, right, is going over 443. So I feel better. I still don't feel great, right? Because we have this assets. That's the one that's running all the port 80 stuff. I honestly haven't had a chance to really go and see what that box does because, again, from an ethical perspective, you don't pen test somebody else's asset unless you have permission. So very important not to go do that. So I could probably go do a little bit of open source research and figure out that was. But the goal here is just to show you how quickly it is to get to some knowledge about something you may or may not have true understanding of. So another one I want to do that's super fun here. So again, this is the source. So we got destinations. So that's where stuff is going. We have the source. Source is where stuff is coming from into my network. So let me go grab source here. I'm going to put this on here. And for fun, you could use absolutely. Yep. You could do Showdown on that for sure. Absolutely. So for fun, in fact, we're gonna get to Showdown a little bit, Jeremiah. So good question. So for fun, let's see what Google does. I don't know. Let's see. I was gonna do Xbox again, but let's more fun. So Google is interesting, right? So believe it or not, this is a great way from a network perspective, just sitting at your house doing what I just did, right? Where you can learn a whole lot about the external capabilities of organizations and how many different kinds of servers they have that are delivering you specifically content. This is a great way to do your own kind of OSINT to relate to what Jeremiah said in the chat, right? Very, very interesting stuff. But as you can see here, the vast majority of the source traffic here from Google is all encrypted. And then, of course, we see a bunch of port 53 stuff because that, I resolve DNS. A lot of DNS goes to 8.8.8 or 8.8.4.4, which is the Google DNSs, right? So not surprising to see that. Okay. So another cool thing with Power BI is these amazing visualizations. So you can actually grab different kinds of visualizations from people that have built ones. And this is called a chord graph. And as you can see, there's lots of connections out here, right? But what's super interesting here is here's all of those. If I click over here, right, we're going to narrow that down just to the port 80. For fun. So there's just the port 80 going back and forth between and you can see it here, my Comcast modem, because encapsulation, and that xboxlive.com assets machine. So very, very cool stuff that you can find out very, very quickly with a very smart visualization. Another one to look at, this is Instagram. That's kind of fun, right? What's really interesting, though, is sometimes the data that gets through, that's my son's iPhone, it's very interesting that actually shows up as a specific thing. That means that at some point, there was a direct query from his device to one of these things, and it then showed up when it came back. So that's super interesting to me and also kind of scary when you think about it, especially if you got kids. The last graph I want to show you is called a force graph. And you're going to go, oh, good Lord, Brad, what the heck are you showing me here? No, this isn't the fun stuff. Let me get to my list here. So this is going to show you connectivity. In this case, I'm looking specifically destination connectivity, so leaving my network out. So I'm going to go ahead and filter for fun on this page. And what we're going to do here is we're going to go to our advanced filtering on this. Again, the power of this tool. We're going to type in Google. Let's see what Google looks like on the time I did this packet capture in terms of traffic in and out of my network. And there it is, right? You can see all of those machines that we saw previously. You can see sort of that floating diagram, and the biggest one is going out for, here and connecting to one of my devices in the network. Let's look at, for fun, let's look at Xbox, see what that looks like. And then we'll look at one more, which I think you'll really enjoy because it always does weird things when this thing pops out. There's the Xbox connectivity. So that's all the stuff that's going out, right? So again, you can do this at home right now and learn a lot about what's happening in your network. And I totally recommend it from a learning perspective, right? You don't need permission, right? Don't scan stuff outside of your own network, but you don't need permission to do stuff in behind your own firewall, right? Learn your network, right? These are skills you can directly apply to what you're doing out in the real world. Last thing. Let's look at Amazon, because this one always freaks out on me when I do Amazon. Amazon is really weird. I was actually doing a lot of work, and so it's going to take a second here. Look at this. So what's really cool here is you see the big gigantic circle right there in the middle. That is the volume of traffic that was going out to Amazon from my network during that particular packet capture. Now, I was doing some very intentional stuff. I was going through and searching through, Amazon and a bunch of things like that just to generate this traffic. But wow, that's amazing. And look at all the nodes that Amazon uses just to be communicative back to your browser, right? When you're doing that kind of surfing. So just think about that. This connectivity stuff is absolutely amazing. And you can totally do this in your home network. All right, so I'm not going to save that. All right, we're moving on. Assets. We're in the home stretch, folks, I promise. So assets. Assets are not just hardware. And I alluded to that up front, right? Most people believe that assets are something that is, it's a piece of hardware. I know, hey, Brad, I totally know all my assets. We got, 5 Cisco routers, we got 6 switches, we got a Palo Alto firewall, we're a Dell shop, so we got all these Dell laptops. And I stop them right there and I say, I said, that's great, awesome, it's all hardware, right? But where's your code repo? Oh, we do that in GitHub. Okay. Is that important to your company? Well, yeah. You're right. How secure is that? Do you have multi-factor authentication turned on? What about your admin accounts? Well, everybody has admin. Really? Holy crap. We probably shouldn't do that, right? So these are all things, right? What do you have exposed to the internet? Do you really know what's exposed on the internet? I'll tell you a war story about that here in just a second. But again, I want you to, take the slide, lock it in. Assets are so much more than just the hardware that you see. So we're going to do a quick demo because, again, I like demos. Demos are awesome. So let's go and bring this thing up here. So if I can get it to come up here, let me hit the right button. Okay, cool. Nope, I don't want to shut you down. Thanks very much. So this is a Kali Linux box. So it's a great pen testing platform. It is on an internal network, so I'm not doing anything out there. And so just under the covers here, I have a Metasploitable 2 Linux box, right? Just to demonstrate the power of tools like Nmap, right? You should do this in your home network, right? Do this, right? See what's all exposed, right, in your home network. You'd be surprised what's running on your printer right now. Years ago, I may have buffer overflowed a printer at my house that my wife bought because we had a printer die, and it hasn't worked the same since. So again, your point of reference, don't do that. But long story short, right, this is an Nmap scan that shows some basics about, in this case, a Metasploitable 2 box. Now, granted, if you find this stuff, here's the thing. I'm going to tell you something right now. Don't be surprised. Maybe freak out, but don't be surprised if you're running an older ISP modem that Telnet is exposed and open on it. Believe it or not, many ISPs out there, especially in the DSL variety, so digital subscriber line, are still using Telnet to push updates to routers. It's not awesome, but it's a fact. So you got to be aware of that kind of stuff. So again, same kind of thing, right? I want more details, so that doesn't help me, right, in terms of understanding all the problems that I have. So these are internal assets. So I would run an nmap-a, and that's going to include, let me get my notes over here, OS detection, service detection, nmap scripting engine, and it takes a long time. So if you got a big home network like I do, right, don't run that. Do it against individual devices and see what you get. But as an example, right, here's all the data you can get with a much more detailed nmap scan. You can find potential vulnerabilities like that's hackable. Let's see here, that's hackable. All sorts of things like that, right? It is very important, right? And you can do the exact same things on the places that you work, right? But again, with permission, all those kinds of things. So that's that one. So I'm going to minimize that. The next thing I promised, and somebody mentioned Shodan. I love Shodan. Shodan is awesome. Let me bring up Shodan here, right? Shodan is a great tool. Pay attention, Black Friday. They usually do a Black Friday sale, and you can buy a year of Shodan for pretty cheap. Totally recommend it. As a cybersecurity person or out there, you definitely want to understand how to use things like this, like Shodan, right? Because it is great for gathering data and information. For example, here on Shodan, right, I might run a search like RDP, remote desktop protocol, and I've done this before. And all of a sudden you come down here and you go, why is somebody got, in this case here, somewhere in Germany, an exposed Windows 10 2016 server with this front end out hanging on the internet, right? You can bet your bottom dollar that threat actors are going after that right now and trying to brute force it. Right. This is how attacks happen, folks. Right. So you need to know, like we talked about assets, all your assets and things and who touches what and repos and data and all that stuff. But you also need to know those external things, incredibly important to know the external facing assets, and a good place to find them is Shodan. I did an incident response one time for an organization. And one of the things they said, hey, Brad, go check, go do some hunting, see what you can find, like Shodan, other sources as to what's exposed on the internet. And lo and behold, what did I find? Right, I found an Internet Information Server, so a Microsoft IIS 6.0, old. This is like, it'd be like old Apache, right? So this is an old internet. This is an old web server for Microsoft for this organization, exposed on an IP address out in the wild. It could have been broken into bigger than day. That wasn't the actual vector of the threat actors, but if I was that threat actor, I would have not done the phishing stuff. I would have done better homework on the organization, and I would have gone in that way. Because they probably weren't, they said, here was the words they said, which is really interesting. They said, we forgot that was out there. And unfortunately, that's why I talk about assets here, and why we got to know them is people forget when they put stuff out. Who knows? You put out the Wi-Fi router that worked, right? And it's been there for 5 years, never had any updates, right? Has exploitable vulnerabilities. Find lots of those out there. And we just forgot about it because we put it in a closet, and nobody has any problems connecting to the internet. And so we have to be really cognizant of those kinds of things. All right, so I'm going to do my public service announcement, and I can't do a cyber presentation without a little bit of Star Wars. You see the rebel / symbol up there. You got the Mandalorian symbol in the middle, the gray. You got the bad guys, the First Order of the Empire, on the red. Many of the tools, Kali, for example, even stuff in logging that you can do, right? Things like that, right? Just even Nmap scanning, right? Can be construed or misconstrued as, you doing bad things if you don't have permission. So public service announcement, what you do on the internet, especially in the cybersecurity space and with stuff that we've talked about this morning and this afternoon, depending on where you are, these things are all about intent, right? So if you decide to do things with bad intent, i.e. red, right? You're like, you've joined, Darth Vader and Kylo Ren, right? If you choose to do things with good intent and be on the defensive side, small and scrappy, right? Not a lot of resources, and do good things and take the stuff that we did here, right? You definitely want to make sure that you're doing all of those things on the defense side, right? To stop the bad guys, right? And then there's gray space. That's the guys that work for both sides of the fence. Don't ever hire those guys, but definitely be friends with them, because they probably have some interesting skills that you can apply on the good side. And you're absolutely right, Jeremiah, that recent hack was one insecure router, right? And honestly, folks, and that's actually a really great point, Jeremiah, it only takes one. That's it, right? It only takes one mistake. And I know everybody says that in the industry, and it gets said too many times, but it is honestly the truth. I've seen many attacks that were promulgated based on target of opportunity, not a specific target. And once they got in, they didn't care whether you were a hospital. They didn't care where you were the Colorado Department of Transportation. It didn't matter to them. All they cared about was that they were going to get some money from you, in theory, based on ransom, data theft, whatever the case may be, extortion, right? So again, we've got to be really on our toes when it comes to this and paying attention to this, hence why we talked about assets. So 3 conclusions for you, and then we'll get to questions. You got to know logs, you got to go networks, you got to know assets, please, right? And also, again, you can practice this at home. In fact, I recommend you practice at home. Build a lab, right? Build a virtual lab, practice on your home network, do all that stuff, right? That's fair game. Nobody's going to tell you what you can do in your own house, right? So please do that. Practice these skills. These are things that will help you, that when you get the log dumped on you, in the middle of the night that says, oh my gosh, I can't figure out how they got in, right? You've done your homework and you know how they might have got in, and you start looking for that. You hunt for that stuff. And then the last point here is get comfortable with visualization tools, Power BI, Tableau, Pandas, things like that. Really great, awesome capabilities, and they allow you to tell a story with a picture. That's the real magic here, folks. If you can make a picture and tell a story with a picture, you're gonna help your audience better understand what it is you're getting across, and potentially maybe get you some of that budget you need to help secure your environments depending on where you work. So before we get to questions, thank you, VetSecCon. It's been awesome. It's been amazing. I love speaking here. I love helping my fellow veterans, learn stuff and figure out how to get to the next great opportunity they have. This has been my honor and privilege to be here with you today. And with that, here's all my contact details and stuff like that. I am happy to connect with anybody on LinkedIn. Hit me up. If you have questions afterwards, there's all my emails. Like I said, this presentation, I'll upload it to GitHub here in probably the next 30 minutes. But again, so I'm going to pause right there. What questions do you have if you want to drop them in the chat pod right there? I did so good. There's no questions. So I'm actually I'll leave that screen up for a couple of more minutes. All right. Oh, actually, I probably should go to the Q&A, see if there's any Q&A in there. Got to get my mouse in the right spot. Hope it's thinking. Nope, no questions yet. You can put questions in the chat or the Q&A. All right, I'm just checking here. So, one of the things to think about here, right, especially from a learning perspective, since I do have 4 more minutes, and I'll just talk for a second. I will tell you that a lot of what you see here and a lot of the work that I have done over the years, right, a lot of it's been discovery learning. And so the great thing today, I remember back when I was doing stuff back in the 80s with modems and stuff like that, and some basic coding and that kind of thing. I had no idea that this is where we were going to get to, right? When I first joined the internet, when I joined the internet back in the 1993, truly when I went to college, there was like 120,000 machines on the internet. That was it. My first I'll date myself. My first search engine was Gopher. Gopher was awesome. It was the best search engine ever. And then we got Google. But I will tell you that, it's amazing to see how this has grown. And honestly, I will tell you that if you can help, depending on where you're working, whether you're in the business now and you're looking for your next gig, if you are in, or if you're going to want to get into the business, right? One, there's a lot of great resources out there, on YouTube, free resources to learn different things and different capabilities, and get smart about things before you even have to take a formal class. And in fact, I don't want you ever to pay a bunch of money for stuff when you can get a lot of things for free. I will give you, that's not the right place that I wanted to. Let's see here. Let me go here. Let me find a real quick link for you if I can get there, but it's not letting me get where I want to go. Hold on just a second. I'll get you a good link. Sorry about that. I just got to get to my right link. Okay. So one of the great and cool things you can do, like I said, is you can find free stuff. And I want you to find free stuff. And I'm going to stop sharing here for just a second. Actually, no, I'll just grab this and bring it up here, right? You can actually do a Kali Linux course for free, right? Go here to kali.training, right? You can go through this, right? And you can actually, do this training, and it's free. It's amazing. Right? It's amazing, right? There's a lot of free resources out there, and I absolutely 100% encourage you to use them. From the standpoint of free or nearly free, right? There's a lot of great content. If you're looking to get into this business, there's a lot of great content on Udemy for really inexpensive. Look for the sales on that. If you are on LinkedIn, as an example, right? This is something that many folks don't know. If you're a veteran and you've never done this before, you're a transitioning military member, something like that, you can actually on LinkedIn get a LinkedIn premium subscription 1 year for free. right? And LinkedIn's got some great. Yep, thanks for that, Scott, for sharing that link. You can get. There's great training on LinkedIn, right? The key thing in this business, I will tell you, is having that lifelong learning model in your head. Always willing to and jump in and learn something next, right? I'm going to tell you, there's many times, even today, and I don't know everything, is I'll sit in a meeting and go, you just said words I don't know. And I'm going to make notes of that, and I'm going to go look it up and figure out how it all works. I'm getting mildly smart on what Kubernetes does now, which is really interesting, right? So the world is not changing; it's continuing to move fast. And one of the great things I think we learn from the military is the fact that we need to continue to learn. That in the military, it is a lifelong learning process. I'm going to stop sharing. So I've come up to the end of my time. I know you want to take your 10-minute break and get lunch or whatever it is, depending on where you are in the world. Maybe it's 5 o'clock somewhere where you happen to be. But I'm going to let you roll, head on out. I'll hang out here for the next 10 minutes to the top of the hour in case somebody comes with a question. But if I don't see you, please hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect. It has been my absolute pleasure to chat with you today. It's been a lot of fun. I love this conference because it is veterans helping veterans and making sure that that everybody can find their way in this amazing industry that is cybersecurity. So have a great rest of your day. Have a great weekend. Have a happy Halloween. Be safe out there. If hopefully maybe you're trick or treating. I don't know. If you're taking kids trick or treating, be safe out there. And we'll see you all next year.